Hi mums, I've put together this short video to help you to prepare for the mummy and baby Pilates class. So we're just going to be covering some basics just to help you along with the class. These key things are just really important to set the foundation of your Pilates. So if you've got a little bit of time to watch it beforehand, then that's great, but don't worry because we will cover it in the class as well. So the three things that we're going to be looking at are breathing, Pilates setup, and then something that we call centering, which is just about activating your deeper core muscles. So breathing, it sounds really straightforward, but we really try and loop our Pilates movements onto a real nice, slow and steady breath. And sometimes when the Pilates gets too much, or just in life, things get too much, it's really, really beneficial just to come back to your breathing. Pilates is all about mindful movement, and being mindful, we need to make sure that we get rid of all of those external thoughts. So breathing can help to bring us back into ourselves. So a really useful exercise that you can practice is just making sure that you're breathing well. Often we breathe here, we use the muscles around the neck and our shoulders, and we start to build up a lot of tension. So we want to start to think about creating a deep breath right down to the base of our lungs. So set yourself up in a comfortable position. That could be sitting, that could be lying, or you can do this in standing. You can do it when you sat in the car, in a traffic jam. You can do it in the queue at Tesco's. But start by just thinking about bringing your breath in through your nose right down to the base of your lungs. You can pop your hand on your tummy, or you can pop your hands on your rib cage, and you're aiming to feel that natural lift of the rib cage and lift of the tummy as you breathe in. Your breath in should be nice and slow. Breathe in. And your shoulders should stay soft. And then slowly breathe out. And just feel that rib cage shrink back down again. I'm just going to leave you for a moment just to do a few more breath cycles. You can close your eyes if it feels good. And breathe out, or whenever you feel you need to. Now try and make your breath out a little bit longer than your breath in. Sometimes we work on what's called a 7 to 11 pattern. So breathing in for a count of 7, pausing at the top, and then breathing out to a count of 11. When we work with our Pilates, we breathe in to prepare, and we breathe out to either set a muscle contraction when we do our centering, which we'll look at in a minute, or to focus on the effort of the movement. So hopefully that feels quite good, maybe a little bit relaxed. I try and just fit in a few deep breaths when everything else is getting a bit chaotic, just to try and center me again and then go back to the task in hand. So our Pilates setup is about a few key elements. We're looking at aiming to get a nice position through the spine, and then we load the spine and load the body, the peripheries, the arms and the legs. So we start at the neck and we try and create length through the neck. So you can practice this in sitting, you can practice it in lying, and just imagine a piece of string just drawing you up towards the ceiling or towards the top of your bed. But as the neck lifts up, we want to do the opposite with the shoulders. So we melt the shoulder blades down into the back pockets. Imagine that you're trying to really just tuck those shoulder blades down into your back pockets, and you're just working on a gentle muscle contraction at this area here. As we do that, we open out the fronts of the collarbones, so trying to create length through the collarbones. And again, that creates that activity around the shoulder blades. Often when we're feeling a bit stressed or tense, or we're doing something with lots of effort, our shoulders start to creep up to our ears and our neck starts to shrink in. So we want to avoid that by creating that lovely length and open position. It's really helpful as well if you're breastfeeding or rocking or just feeding a baby, rocking a baby, settling a baby into a cot. We're here so often and we're just trying to counteract that with that lovely open posture. So you can practice your posture, link it in with your breathing. So that's your heads and shoulders set. We're going to think about rib cage, pelvis and lower back now. So I'm just going to come onto my mat, and this is going to be setting up what we call our rest position. We do a lot of our exercises in rest position, so it doesn't mean we're going to have a rest. But if you lie down, you don't need a mat, just lie somewhere comfortable. on the floor or what have you. I'm actually in my 8-year-old's bedroom, so wherever you can find some space. We come to lie on our backs. I'm just going to drop my camera down a little bit. And we set ourselves up with our feet hip distance apart, and we aim to keep our feet hip distance apart and our knees hip distance apart as well. Quite often our knees tend to cave in, so just try and keep a focus on that alignment. So there's our bottom half sorted. Don't forget, we've got a long neck and shoulders are set in that lovely position. Okay, we're going to think about our ribs now. Often when we work our abs, our ribs start to flare up towards the ceiling and we get a little bit of a gap underneath the upper back. We want to try and avoid that. So always trying to connect your rib cage into the mat. Imagine you're lying on a sandy beach and you're trying to press your rib cage down into the sand. Keep that gentle pressure of your rib cage. We're not flattening and squashing, it's just kind of 50% action. And then I'm going to ask you to make a diamond shape with your thumb and your finger. So you're going to place your thumb together and your fingers together. You've got your diamond shape there. Your thumbs are going to rest on your belly button and your fingers are going to point down towards your pubic bone. We're going to work on something called pelvic tilting now, which is really nice just to open up the lower back, and then it's going to help us set our neutral spine position. So can you imagine that there's a marble in the middle of your diamond, and you're going to roll that marble towards your thumbs by flattening your back into your mat, and then roll that marble towards your index fingers by lifting and arching your lower back. So we're going to keep our hips down on the mat, but we're just going to roll on and off the small of your back. And we're just going to show you how that looks just underneath here. So I've got an arch in my back and then I'm flattening my back. Arch in my back and I'm flattening my back. If you find that quite difficult, then just spend some time doing that. You can do it in sitting, you can do it in standing as well, but lying down on your back, you get that feedback from your mat, from the movement. Sometimes this is just a nice one to do if your back's feeling a little bit stiff. Again, if you've been picking up baby quite a lot, or you've been arching over your cot, that's what I'm doing at the moment, trying to teach the baby to settle. So I'm starting to feel it in my lower back. So finding that neutral spine, we come somewhere in between those two positions. So your marble is resting in between your index fingers and your thumbs. And then this is where we move on to centering. So when we think about centering, we're creating tension in what we call our primary sling, which are the deeper muscles that sit around the lower back and the pelvis. So at the front of our pelvis, we've got our deep abdominal muscles, our transversus abdominis. If you had a cesarean section, then there would have been some cutting through those muscles to get to baby. And then the second muscle group is called pelvic floor, which is a sling muscle that sits between your pubic bone and your tailbone. It's the only horizontal load-bearing muscle in the body. And for all of us during pregnancy, there's obviously additional load with the weight of the baby and everything that comes with that. And if you had a vaginal delivery, there will have been potentially some trauma to the pelvic floor, things like tearing, things like episiotomies, or even if you were lucky enough not to experience that, still it gets a good stretch. So if you've been having any issues with continence, it's highly likely that we need to be working on that pelvic floor. But as women in general, even women who have not had children, it's really important that we work on our pelvic floor, particularly as we age, because we want to kind of keep those pelvic organs well supported by the pelvic floor. So let's go back to the first one, the deep abdominal muscles. So you're back in your rest position and you're just going to think about just below your belly button, gently drawing your tummy towards your spine. And how it should feel is just a gentle sense of tension. We're not bracing, we're working at about 20%. Real light contraction. What you can do is where your index fingers were pointing towards your pubic bone, just separate them slightly and press down into your tummy, just on the inside of your pelvis or where you feel your hips sit. As you gently draw your tummy towards your spine, you might feel a little bit of pressure pushing back on you. And that's because when we recruit these deeper muscles, it actually presses away and we're creating almost like a corset around the pelvis and lower back. Some things that I like to think about is tightening my belt by a notch or two, so a little bit of a tensioning across there. And we're just going to gently hold that contraction and then revisit those lovely breaths. So we shouldn't feel like we need to hold our breaths because we're working that hard. So that's why it's always important to come back to your breathing. So gently holding that contraction and breathe deeply. And that's your centering using your deep abdominal muscles. You can also center with your pelvic floor because the muscles connect through fascia. So if you find it difficult to connect in with your deep abdominal muscles, then let's talk about your pelvic floor. So as we've identified, your pelvic floor sits between your tailbone and your pubic bone, and you have more stronger connections with those muscles actually around your tailbone. So often when people think of pelvic floor, we think about trying to stop yourself from having a wee, but actually we want to start at the back of the pelvic floor and bring that connection to the front of the pelvic floor. So start by gently tightening your back passage and then bring that tightening through towards your front passage. You can think about a zip going from your tailbone to your pubic bone and then maybe even up towards your belly button and drawing that zip together. You can think about gently trying to lift a blueberry up through your back passage or your front passage. There's lots of things that we can do to connect into your pelvic floor. It's not advisable to try and stop yourself from mid-flow when you're having a wee, because that can cause infections, urinary tract infections. But if you are really struggling to find that connection, then sometimes just trying that out so you can get the feeling of it, and then you can come away from that and practice it on your mat. So what's really important when we are engaging with deep abdominal muscles, but even more so our pelvic floor, is how we link it into our breathing. As I mentioned earlier, we've got that primary sling, and your diaphragm, your muscle that helps move your lungs, is part of that primary sling. So we always want to connect our contraction with our breath out so that the muscles are working together and not opposite. So breathing in to prepare, and then as you breathe out, gently drawing in from back to front passage. Again, we're not working hard. It's a gentle background contraction, something that we feel that we could be able to hold. Holding it for a few breaths and then releasing. And what's really important with your pelvic floor is you make sure you completely release it. We often focus on strengthening the pelvic floor, but some women can have hypertonicity in their pelvic floor, which means it's always slightly switched on. And that can cause problems with continence and pain as well. So making sure you're completely relaxing that pelvic floor, letting everything go before you reset again. And there's two ways that we work our pelvic floor to get it strong. We do those gentle long holds, aiming to build up to a count of 10. But we also need to practice switching on and off. So have a go now at just gently squeezing and releasing, squeezing and releasing. You're imagining you're sort of lifting up and going down, lifting up and going down, lifting up and going down, on, off, on, off. These quick contractions help us for those incidents where maybe we sneeze and we might pass wind, or we might leak a little bit. So it's that fast twitch contraction that you can also do if you can feel a sneeze or a cough coming on, just to prevent that continence issue. So that's it. We've worked on our breathing, we've worked on our Pilates setup. Our Pilates setup will also come into different positions, like lying on our side, 4-point kneeling, sitting, standing, but we'll cover that in the class. And then we've covered our centering as well. So have a little practice of that. Maybe next time you're giving baby a bottle, you could do a few pelvic floor contractions. If you're feeding your toddler, you could practice working on your deep abdominals. Like I say, there's loads of opportunities to do it, but we don't often put ourselves first. But now is your time to work on that, getting yourself strong. And I can't wait to meet you in class, and we'll answer any questions in between now and then. Take care.